Okay, when do I start? Okay, they're going to tell me. They're going to tell me when to start.
They probably will.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to introduce Lisa Williams to handle our grouse status update. And I'd like to bring up that Lisa was also runner-up for the Governor's Award for Excellence on her research as well. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Aw. So I want to bring you up to date pretty quickly with grouse population status and present the season recommendation for 2018. And I know you all remember a year ago I was here recommending a closure to the late season for the first time since the 1960s. At that time, we heard from 220 hunters who took the time to write to us. 72% of them supported that season closure. So I want to thank the hunters and also thank the board for your support during that time. Unfortunately, we're not seeing improvement over the past year. We shouldn't really expect it within 12 months, but we can always hope that we would see a turnaround. When I made that recommendation last year, I promised hunters that I would develop a harvest framework that would guide the future of how to set seasons. I kept that promise. I'm going to spend some time today talking to you about how that framework functions and how it brought us to this 2018 season recommendation. But first, we'll talk a little bit about the status and where we are with grouse. This shows grouse abundance in good habitat over the past 50 years. And you can see this tipping point that occurred in the early 2000s and an accumulation of record lows that have happened since then. So even in good habitat, our birds have not really had a chance to recover. You see the same pattern with our summer brood surveys, our summer sighting surveys. You see that same tipping point in the early 2000s and the accumulation of record lows that have occurred. Our ongoing research indicates that West Nile virus, which entered the state in the early 2000s, is an important driver of these declines. I'll show you directly how West Nile seems to be impacting grouse populations. These graphs show grouse abundance in the northwest region and the south central region. You can see the flow, the boom and bust of grouse over time. Then the red bars indicate very bad West Nile virus years. So you can see when West Nile erupts on the landscape, it triggers grouse declines. The interesting thing, the hopeful thing, is what happens between those bad viral years. So in the northwest and north central regions, we see this beautiful, robust, and strong recovery that occurs during mild years of virus. In the northeast and the southern regions, though, we see a rather weak recovery that's followed by another series of declines when West Nile hits again. So really, we need a break. More than anything else, the birds need a break from West Nile for a couple years. Unfortunately, 2017 was a near record year for West Nile virus, with early detection and rates 2 to 3 times the 10-year average this past summer. So they didn't get that break this year. Because the north and the south populations react differently, because they're exposed to differential hunting pressure, and because they're exposed to differential disease impact, the new framework recommends a split zone approach to the grouse season. This will be the first time that we've done this in Pennsylvania. So the season decisions will be made independently for the northern grouse range versus the rest of the state, based on what's happening in that particular area over time. We made this because of the issues that I just discussed, and we also took into account hunter opinion. So our 2015 Grouse Hunter Survey showed a majority support for a split zone approach. As promised, we've also developed a responsive harvest framework. This framework provides a mechanism to allow the season to expand and contract based on what grouse populations are doing. So when populations are low, it leads us to a more restrictive season. When populations improve, it allows us to liberalize the season and create more hunting opportunity. The framework would be based on grouse abundance, which we get from hunter flush rate data. It would also be based on production, which we get from our summer sighting survey that our foresters collect. And it also gives some acknowledgement of disease impact. I'll show you how it works in a second, but I just want to say that we're pretty unique in being able to use this type of framework. We have more than 50 years of hunter flush rate data, more than 30 years of production data, and 17 years of active disease surveillance data through DEP. These strong data sets and our collaboration with DEP, those are assets that few other states have. So if anyone is going to try to turn the situation around for grouse, it makes sense that Pennsylvania would be the one to try it. Very basically, this is how it works. Season length would be a product of grouse abundance, production, and disease. When indicators are all good, it would lead us to a 4-week late season. When indicators are moderate, it would lead us toward a 1-week season, and when everything is poor, it would lead us to a late season decision. So it's transparent, it's consistent, and it allows hunters to know why and how decisions are being made from year to year. This has been reviewed by our executive staff within our bureau and also by the regions with no major concerns. It's similar to the types of frameworks that we use for migratory game birds and for other species in Pennsylvania. Now, when I talk about low, medium, and high, I'm essentially talking about quartiles in the data. Quartiles allow us to split out that normal variation and identify the top 25 and the bottom 25% of our observations. So that gives you an idea when I'm tossing around those words, low, medium, and high. This is our production data for the Northern Management Zone as of 2017. So it shows you where we are. We're in that low category, the bottom quartile of data. So this looks pretty geeky, and that's what we do as biologists, but I'll just run you through really quickly how the framework works. If we had high grouse abundance, we were in boom days for grouse, we would look at our summer production data. Next. If that was also high, it would lead us to a 4-week season, a 4-week decision. If abundance was high and production was moderate, then we would check West Nile virus impacts. If they had been low that year, we'd still go with a 4-week season. However, if they were moderate or high, we would go with a more restrictive 1-week season, which would be that season immediately after Christmas. However, if production is low, then we're going to have a closed season because we know we're not getting the juvenile recruitment into the population that we want. So that's essentially how it works. In years of moderate abundance, flush rates are moderate. If our production rates are high, we checked West Nile. If West Nile had behaved itself and it was low, then we would still go with a 4-week season. If it was moderate or high, then we'd have a more restrictive season. So you can see how West Nile serves as sort of a tiebreaker if abundance and production are leading us in 2 different directions. So what does that mean for 2018 season? Well, in 2017, the year just ending, in that northern management zone, abundance was very low. Our summer sightings were also extremely low, as you saw on the graphs. So the recommendation at that point is for a closed late season in the north. In the southern management zone, our abundance was low. Our production was moderate, but again, that population had little to no chance to recover, and that leads us to a closed late season, 0 weeks. So it's all about whether the population has had a chance to recover or not since the previous decision. So just in summary, the recommendation for 2018-2019 is a statewide closure of the late season while we retain our normal fall season segments and our typical bag limit. The reason that it's the late season that rises and falls based on grouse numbers is that it's during the late season that over half of our harvest is made up of adults. And we would rather have those adults in the population for the following year. So the goal is to increase breeding populations, population to bring up baseline numbers. I want to assure the board and also our hunters that we will be assessing the success of this over time. This is not a done deal. We'll be running 2 models in the background as new data comes in. One model will assume that we are making a detectable difference in the population. The other one will assume that there's no detectable difference that comes out of this new approach. Over time, as we see which model competes better, we should get a sense of whether we're on the right track or not. So it's very responsive not only to the grouse population, but it's responsive also to whether we're going in the direction we want to. The goal of the grouse management program is sustainable and huntable populations. Harvest management is one way we do that. Habitat management is the critical other way. And you heard from Dave about how active we are, how we are increasing those acres each year. When I'm talking to our foresters, our land managers, and DCNR foresters, we're talking a lot now about targeting where we put habitat, using the population data we have, even down to the township level, to say this township is one that really deserves attention. Because now we know where virus is and we know where birds are. So we're really in a better position to start targeting where we put habitat. While we're having those discussions, we're focused specifically on best management for grouse, and in particular for broods, because we want to bring that production up. The third component of the program is trying to figure out West Nile virus. We've looked at other diseases. West Nile seems to be the player that we need to respond to. And so we're looking at research in the hope that we find management action that comes out of this disease research. In 2017, we started looking specifically at virus in grouse habitat, working with DEP's West Nile surveillance program. We trapped 15,000 mosquitoes on Scotia game lands in Centre County. We identified 25 different species occurring in grouse habitat. Of those, 8 could carry the disease, occurred side by side with grouse, and bit birds. We got a pretty good sense of the types of water bodies that produce those different mosquitoes, and we really started to hone in on what we think is the prime suspect, Culex restuans. In 2018, we'll be working with Penn State and with DEP again, starting a landscape scale project to see where that species shows up on the landscape at a large scale and also at a local scale. Really looking for barriers and thresholds that we can use on the landscape to get ahead of this mosquito. Perhaps elevation, perhaps distance from water. If we can see where the prevalence of that mosquito starts to tail off, we'll have a better idea of where to put habitat. The whole effort is really designed to stack the deck back in favor of grouse recovery. So our response to the decline is coming from multiple directions, but it begins with prudent and reasonable season setting. I thank you for considering my 2018 recommendation of a closed late season. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Any comments or questions?
I know you're in contact with grouse hunters a lot. Of all the people doing research, I think the contact you have is incredible. But I guess my question is, have you had any kind of a feeling one way or the other if the people that are supporting what you're doing had a lower harvest rate in the first season this year, if they kind of took that into consideration when they were out grouse hunting?
If they were more supportive, if they were
Bagged less birds.
if they bagged less birds. Yeah, certainly
Yeah.
that was the case.
You saw that from your hunters?
At a gut, I can only speak from a gut level
Sure.
because we don't have data on that. But avid hunters who know those local pockets where birds are do not see the same problem as hunters who don't have those local hotspots. And so while 72% of folks supported us, the ones who didn't support us, it really came from that point. You know, I haven't seen a problem, or I haven't seen the problem that you're describing. Our issue is that we can't manage at that scale of local hotspots. And our other issue is that our mission is to support a sustainable statewide population. So part of it is just we're talking at different scales. But even the folks, you know, the most passionate people that I heard from against the proposal have sort of grudgingly, said, all right, let's take some time and look, but make sure you're looking. Make sure you're seeing if it works. Don't put this in place and leave it for 30 years. And that was really the point behind developing that framework and developing that background model system that we're going to use.
But I think even when we shut that late season down, I expected to see more complaints from grouse hunters than we got. So I know that you've got the support in the
Yeah,
field.
I was very humbled. I've always said that I work with the best constituency in Pennsylvania. Grouse hunters, woodcock hunters are passionate. And this was really an example where they showed their passion for the bird. And they want us to get it right, and they want to help us to get it right.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Jim.
One of the things that people did seem to complain about, Lisa, was that, they're saying, well, you're not putting enough early successional habitat on the ground, that's why we're seeing these declines. But as you showed, even in those northern tier counties where we do have good habitat, they still weren't recovering. So it kind of points that almost has to be West Nile. I guess, when you look at how much effort it takes to create the early successional habitat and the length of time it takes to do it versus how long it might take to spray. I mean, would it make sense to do targeted spraying maybe after you get that localized data to show where there's way too many of these mosquitoes? I mean, they're a human health hazard as well. Maybe we could get some cost sharing with ag or with some other agency, DCNR sprays for black flies. I mean, can we do that? And would it be a quicker recovery than waiting to try to keep catching up with early successional habitat?
Right, and that's something we've talked about with DEP. I think we'll have a better idea after this next study where we go beyond Scotia game lands and start looking at other areas and figuring out what water is producing this particular species. In some cases, spraying might be an option. It's going to be expensive and it's going to be labor intensive. There may be a situation where we can prevent problems in the first place. One thing that I found when I was trapping on Scotia, a lot of these mosquitoes are coming out of equipment ruts and mud puddles, not fully functioning wetlands. They're coming out of holes that don't have mosquito predators.
Yeah, but those are considered vernal ponds too, that are
Well,
probably good for amphibians.
not an equipment rut. There are places that we can just sort of preventatively, proactively make sure that we're not creating a worse situation. There may be opportunities for spraying, but again, we have 1.5 million acres. Pennsylvania's
You
a
don't
big
have to do it all,
state,
though. I
so,
mean, you could do it in targeted areas.
yeah.
I mean, Northwest is one big swamp, right, Rich? So just come up our way.
We're not going to spray the northwest region of Pennsylvania. But I do think as we look at this local scale mosquito production, we'll start to come up with ideas how we can manage, or at least mitigate the risks.
Good.
Thank you. Mary Jo?
Kill the mosquitoes.
You got 15 minutes?
That's an environmental problem though, isn't it? Where they call it an oil and gas man, you know better.
I'm telling you it works.
But.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Yep,
so
Yep,
that's the, okay,
that's the pointer. If that one decides not to work, here's a backup.
okay, thanks. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for inviting me here to speak on the wild turkey program. I'll give a brief update on the turkey program, including our trends in our harvest and populations. I'll go into a little bit of our management strategies, basically our results from our last August volunteer turkey survey, our management plan revision, and then finally our season recommendations, specifically the spring season. And I also would like to note that the turkey constituent is also a really good constituent. Oh, I don't see the top of my slide. I wonder if we can fix that. So that first slide is talking about wild turkey spring harvest. So we either cut off the top or cut off the left.
Shouldn't be.
There we go. Thank you, Lori.
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so first I'd like to talk about harvest trends. And in terms of our spring turkey harvest, you can see basically over the last 10 years, spring harvests have ranged between a high of about 45,000 in 2009 and a low the following year of about 34,000 spring turkey males, bearded birds. The spring 20, our previous season, 2017, was about 38,100 turkeys, and this was pretty similar to the previous 10-year average. But it was below the previous 3-year average of about 39,500, basically because we had some 2 really good seasons in a row. Now, I do want to note that the second tag sales continue, or sales of our second tag continue. This past year, we were at over 20,500 tags sold for a second permit, and that is another record year. It just keeps going up every year. You can see it's over the previous 3-year average of about 18,650. Now, if you look at the harvest of our second tag, it was slightly below average, slightly below the previous 3-year average. I do want to note that our hunter success for the first tag was above average this past year, and that was because we had fewer hunters participating this past year, which may be an anomaly. In terms of our fall harvest, however, our fall harvest during the past 10 years have ranged from about 25,000 in 2007 to a low of about 10,800 back in 2016. We have some preliminary results for our fall 2017 harvest based on our harvest report cards that I've corrected for reporting rate, and that preliminary harvest is 11,781. Now, the final game take harvest will be available this summer. So, taken into consideration, this is the preliminary. So this is this harvest was about a 30% decrease from the previous 10-year average of about 17,600, and it's also a decrease from the previous 3-year average, as you can see from the graph. I also would like to note that you can see how fall harvests have been really decreasing since the mid-1990s. I do want to note one good note about our reports. This past year, 2017, was the first year that we had over 50% of the reports coming from online reporting. If you add online reporting with the telephone reporting, 58% of our reports were electronic, meaning that only 42% of our harvest reports for turkeys this year was from mailed-in report cards. And that is the first time that's ever happened. Now, for spring harvest, we've been consistent. About 55 to 65% of our reports during the spring come in electronically, either telephone or online, mainly online. And that's been consistent for the last 8 years that it's been available. So this is looking good for fall harvest reports. Now, switching over to turkey hunter numbers in Pennsylvania, if you look first at the reddish-orange line, which is our spring turkey hunters, the number of spring turkey hunters has remained relatively constant, since 1983, about just under 250,000 hunters. In 2016, we're at almost 215,000 spring turkey hunters. This past year was a decrease. I don't have that up on the graph, but I think that was an anomaly for this year. So it's been pretty consistent. But in terms of fall turkey hunter numbers, you can see from this graph, from the green line, our fall turkey hunter numbers have declined about 51% since 1983. If you look at total hunters for Pennsylvania, during the same period, total hunters have declined about 22%. But keep in mind, fall turkey hunters, we believe that perhaps some of those hunters are switching over to archery deer hunting. But even with this major decline in our fall turkey hunter numbers, I have a graph or table up here showing that fall turkey hunters, turkey hunters in general, continue to be the second most popular game. Well, turkeys continue to be the second most popular game species in Pennsylvania, behind deer, even still above bear hunters, which the previous 3-year average was about 124,400 bear hunters. So with that in mind, even though our number of turkey hunters has declined, I wanted to look at normalizing our harvest by hunter effort to kind of get an idea of our normalized fall turkey harvest. And if you look at this graph, this is the normalized fall turkey harvest per 100 hunter days. You can still see a declining trend, especially since 2009. So what does this mean for management? Well, we conducted the hen harvest rate study, and we saw that the results from the hen harvest rate study showed that fall season length actually continues to impact our harvest rates. Fall harvest rates that exceed 5 to 10% can lead to population declines, and during our study, we had hen harvest rates of 2 to 10% during those 4 years. So from that, we can see that fall harvest rate still plays a major factor in our in population management. And from that study, we saw that fall harvest rate can be managed by manipulating fall season length. Now, we have to look at fall turkey hunters. We have to keep ourselves in perspective with the rest of the country. And this graph shows how fall turkey hunters in Pennsylvania far exceed that of any other state in the nation by an order of magnitude. Okay, so we have in 2013, for example, there were just less than 200,000 fall turkey hunters. The next nearest states of Wisconsin and Texas and West Virginia had just over 50,000 fall turkey hunters. Okay, so you're talking an order of magnitude different. So, basically we still have a very strong tradition of fall turkey hunting in Pennsylvania. So management of the fall harvest in Pennsylvania continues to be a priority. Okay, so with that, I'd like to go into the wild turkey population trend. The 2017 spring turkey population was about 216,800 birds, and that was similar to the 5-year running average, but it is below our 10-year running average. Now, beginning in about 2010, with this arrow here, you can see we basically had a double whammy with our turkey population. We had an unexpected spring population decline, doubled with in 2010. We introduced the 3-day Thanksgiving fall turkey hunting season. So since then, through harvest monitoring, we know that 3-day Thanksgiving season, that harvest equates to about a week of the second or third week of the season. So basically, with that 3-day season, we increase the fall season by an additional week, wherever we have that 3-day season. So with that in mind, our population management strategy has been to try to get back closer to our 2009 population level of about 250,000. We're really trying to get back to about 240,000 turkeys on the landscape. And so you can see, since our low of 2010, we've been slowly building up somewhat. So the way we've been doing that is by curtailing the fall seasons. And so this slide, I want to show you what we've been doing with the fall turkey hunting seasons from 2013 to 2017. We've actually reduced the fall seasons in 16 of our wildlife management units. All of those management units in the olive are now 2-week regular seasons plus the 3-day Thanksgiving season. We have over the tan management units, 4 management units, where we have now a 1-week regular season plus the 3-day season. Management unit 1B is the only area where we have a week-long season with no Thanksgiving season. And then we've expanded the season in Management Unit 5A down in South Central Pennsylvania. And we've actually opened the season in Management Unit 5B. So those 2 management units have 3-day seasons. Now, we did not change the season length in 2D. It remains a 2-week plus a 3-day Thanksgiving season, so basically a 3-week season. And then we also have not changed the seasons in 2B and 2C, which continue to be 3 weeks plus the 3-day Thanksgiving season. And then, of course, 5C and 5D don't have population densities large enough at the management unit to establish a fall turkey hunting season. One note that I would like to make about crossbow harvest, now we've allowed crossbows for turkey hunters since the 2006-2007 hunting seasons. And for this spring, that harvest with crossbows has been relatively stable since about 2010, where it reached about a 1% of the harvest. So we have about 1% of the spring harvest with crossbows, another 1% with other bows, so about 2% of the harvest. But with fall, it's interesting. Now, in 2006, when we first legalized it, crossbows was about 1% of the harvest, but in 2016, I noticed that it jumped up to 7% of the harvest, and now the results from this year, it's actually up to 8% of the harvest is coming from crossbows. And so in 2016, it actually surpassed the harvest with other bows for the first time. So other bows comprises about 4% of the harvest. And so now with all bows, it's about 11 to 12% of the harvest is coming from bows. So that's kind of interesting, especially since it seems like that harvest is being drawn from the traditional shotgun harvest. So we're seeing now, for the last 2 years, shotgun harvest is about 60%. Rifle harvest has remained the same, about 28% of the harvest. So I thought that would just be something interesting for you all. In terms of the volunteer turkey sighting survey, which we've been conducting for the last 2 years in August, this gives us a recruitment index, which basically means it allows us to know the number of poults seen per all hens seen. So this means hens with and without broods. And so this gives us an overall index of the recruitment out there each summer. And so this is a volunteer survey that we use only to compare productivity to other northeastern states that use the same type of volunteer surveys. I do want to note that this year we introduced a mobile app, and I thought we would get this huge influx of reports, because now, you can report your sightings while you're out in the field right on your phone, and, it pops up exactly where you are as long as you have cell phone coverage. And I loved it. It was a great app to use. We also have the internet-based reporting as well on our webpage. However, we only had just over 19,600 turkey sightings this year, compared to over 30,000 last year for our initial year. But when I looked at other states, their total sightings for this year were down as well. So what this means is our total recruitment index this year was 2.3 poults per all hens seen. And even though our total number of sightings was down, the poult per hen index was not much different than last year. Last year's was 2.4. And we were actually above the regional average of the other mid-Atlantic states, of about 2.1. If we look, it was interesting because the New England states had a higher production index. They were about 2.5 poults per hen. And I just would like to note also, our regular WCO survey was about 2.5 poults per hen this year. So this survey is not is a different type of survey than our WCO survey, and this survey is not used for season setting recommendations. It's basically just to look at comparisons with other states. Let me get into the management plan real quick. I am revising our 10-year plan, and what we're looking at doing is finalizing those more robust population models, and including them in our structured decision-making process for season recommendations that I'm working on with Dwayne Diefenbach at Penn State and some other states. We are developing some carrying capacity models for habitat as well as social carrying capacity. And our emphasis going forward in the next 10 years is really more landscape level habitat management with our Bureau of Wildlife Habitat Management. And this draft I hope to have released for internal review as well as review by the Pennsylvania chapter of the National Wild Turkey Federation in the next few weeks. So with that, I'd like to go onto our season recommendations. And there are no fall season recommendations, basically because of, what I was talking about, those changes that we've had from 2013 to 2017. We're going to continue monitoring to see how those changes in the season lengths have affected population trends. So all of the seasons that we had last year, we're recommending for this year as well. Now, I do want to note, my final note here is, and this is an important note, is for the spring 2019 season recommendation. Our recommendation, is to open the season on Saturday, April 27th, 2019, instead of Saturday, May 4th. And you might say, well, why am I suggesting this? And it's because the Wild Turkey Management Plan specifies that the season opens the Saturday closest to May 1st. So in 2019, that would actually be May 4th. May 4th was one day closer to May 1st than April 27th. But during the last few rounds of season recommendations, when we had the Saturdays being such like this, we opted for the slightly earlier season opener. Okay, so, which probably everybody is going to be really happy with, because we'd much rather I see Brian smiling over there, we'd much rather have season open earlier than later. So April 21st, April 27th is basically one day earlier than normal to open the season. So here, now, I do want to note then, if you think about 2020, now 2020, we will go back to, opening up in May, just because of the way the calendar lies and because of leap year. So we were going to go, 2019, we're going to go from one of our earliest season openers to then the next year, one of our latest season openers. And we're going to get a lot of comments about this. And I just want to make sure everybody understands ahead of time, it's just simply because of the way the calendar falls and the fact that we open up our season on a Saturday. Okay, so with that, and so this year, 2018, the season will open on April 28th. So we go from April 28th to April 27th, and then boom, we go to May 2nd. Okay. So with that, I would invite any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the commissioners? Charlie?
How many states permit the rifle in the fall season? Yeah, just rough.
Not many. I know West Virginia and Virginia do. I don't have the answer to that question, but not that many, especially in the Northeast. Yeah.
Couple questions. Do we have any kind of an urban turkey management plan? I mean, it's really becoming a problem in places like Allegheny County, southern Butler County. I mean, they're literally everywhere. They're getting hit on the roads. It just seems like we have to do with deer, we might need an urban turkey management plan. So that's one question. The other is, when you were showing your harvest reporting, so we know that the deer hunters are not reporting a lot of the deer they're taking. Maybe 25% are literally reporting it. Do we have similar data for turkey hunters? And if you could address that.
Yes, we do, and that's why I say we have the reported harvest corrected for the reporting rate, because we know from our game take survey what
So
percentage.
What is that rate, Mary Jo?
Well, for fall, it's about 30. Well, actually, no, it's increased. It's about 38 to 45%, depending on the year.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's, with the spring, we have the spring turkey hunter survey that we send out immediately after the spring season. And so we can get a reporting rate, pretty quickly for the spring season. Spring season is always a higher reporting rate than the fall. Yeah. But in terms of the urban turkey management, what we did back in the mid 2000, about 2009, 2007 to 2009, is we looked at trap and transfer of nuisance turkeys in the Allegheny County in Management Unit 2B, and we actually transferred those turkeys into areas where they could be hunted and on public land.
Burhan's backyard.
In Allegheny County. Yeah. That did work, but we also found that just public education really was more cost effective. It costs a lot of money to trap turkeys and move them, and basically it was a lot of it was a problem of one landowner feeding the birds, and then the birds roosting in somebody else's yard, So when we had landowners work with each other, then it seemed to minimize the problems, and then also the fact that turkeys flock during the winter, and then so once spring comes around, then those flocks typically disperse. Problem is, Allegheny County has such tremendous habitat available in such a small area, You know, it's got some really great oak mast and a lot of terrain, a lot of hills where you just can't develop. And so you have those nice pockets for wildlife that become nuisances. Yeah,
Definitely.
so but we have worked with the Southwest region in the past, and we try to put it back to the landowners to, you know, to stop feeding.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Matt Lavallo. Matt, you got 15 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, well, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to provide you with some brief updates to just a few elements of our Furbearer management program. And today I'm going to provide you some updates on the results of our bobcat and fisher trapping seasons, which have concluded, what we know about the ongoing bobcat hunting season. And I'll close today with just some follow-up discussions about junior fur taking and participation rates that we have here in the Commonwealth. Our bobcat management plan is guided largely by our comprehensive bobcat harvest management programs, guided by our comprehensive bobcat management plan, which was developed and approved by the board in 2013. We're at a midpoint in the 10-year cycle of that plan, so I think it's prudent that we look at some of the trends we're seeing in terms of overall harvest and harvest success rates by our bobcat permit holders. One of the best indices we have in terms of detecting changes in our bobcat populations are reports of incidental bobcat captures. These are bobcats caught in traps, typically set for coyotes or red fox throughout the state. These are bobcats that are released after capture because the captures don't occur within our established bobcat trapping season or in units where we don't have an established bobcat trapping season. And as we look at these trends over time, I think it's insightful if we look at changes in our management approach that occurred during those periods. In the early 90s, we had protection, no hunting and trapping. We saw a slow and steady growth of our bobcat population. Our population really took off in the early 2000s during a period where we limited harvest through permit allocations and a lottery system. In 2010, we changed course. We shortened the season from 120 days down to about 3 weeks of hunting and trapping, and we opened the opportunity to all of our fur takers throughout the state. And so other indices suggest similar patterns and trends occurred during this period of time, but you can see as we made that change in 2000, we saw some declines and now some stabilization in our bobcat population that are probably due to a number of factors. As we were issuing permits through our lottery system, we slowly and incrementally went from 290 permits to over 1,700 permits, and the harvest increased proportionately. We saw very high success rates, anywhere from 25 to 35% success by our permit holders. When we opened the opportunity to all of our fur takers in the state, we went from 1,700 permits on the landscape of Pennsylvania to over 15,000, and the harvest responded accordingly. We more than doubled the harvest during that first year, and it bounced around for a few years, but in recent years we've seen the total harvest beginning to decline. And more importantly, the success rates of our permit holders have begun to decline. We've gone from about 7.3 bobcats being taken per 100 permits issued, now down to almost 5 bobcats being taken per 100 permits issued. During this past year, trapping season, we had 482 harvest reports received throughout the wildlife management units open to trapping. We still have over a week to go in our hunting season. We have about 185 reports currently, and those numbers are changing daily. And so if we had to make a projection, it does appear that this year's total harvest will be down from the previous year, and this trend of declining total harvest will continue. We're not in a crisis situation. It's a slow and steady decline, but we're talking about it today because in our bobcat management plan, we have some guidance that if we see declines in total harvest and success rates combined with declines in some of our population indices, perhaps we should consider altering season length and perhaps going from 3-week seasons of hunting and trapping down to 2 weeks. I don't think we're there yet. We don't have all the data in from this year's season, but at the completion of this year's season, I will provide the board with a comprehensive report broken down by wildlife management units, and we can move forward with discussions from there. Our current proposal is to stay the course, to maintain the 3-week seasons, an earlier bobcat trapping season followed by a bobcat hunting season, and the dates and structure are similar to what we've had in previous years, and to maintain our season bag limit of 1 bobcat per permit holder. Switching over to fisher harvest management, our fisher program is also guided by a comprehensive plan. That plan has ended its first year cycle, our first 10-year cycle, and so we are in the process of revising that plan. We've learned a lot about fisher populations in Pennsylvania in the last 10 years, and so there will be some significant changes in that plan. We'll be looking at ways to provide more opportunity to take fisher. So in the case of bobcat, we may be looking at restricting some opportunities at some point in the future. With fisher, I think there are new opportunities that we can explore. All of our indices tell us that fisher populations are continuing to increase. The increases began in the early 2000s and continue to this day. This is the numbers of unsolicited reports that our game wardens receive and other staff members have received throughout the state. We have other indices of incidental captures. They all tell us the same story. Last year, our trappers in Pennsylvania reported more incidental fisher captures than at any point in our history. We estimate over 3,000 fisher were caught and released in the Commonwealth last year alone. These increases aren't just numeric in terms of densities of fisher in any given area. They're in part due to continued geographic expansion. These light to dark green areas represent stable to increasing fisher populations throughout the Commonwealth. We continue to see rapid expansion along the southeast border of the species distribution as fisher march out of the big woods into suburbia and small suburban woodlots, and a lot of expansion in the western and northwestern portions of the state. So as this continues, we should continue to see more opportunities and be able to provide harvest opportunities in more areas in Pennsylvania. So in last year's fisher trapping season, which occurred from the 16th to the 27th of December, we had a harvest comparable to previous years. Just under 400 fisher were trapped. As we look at the number of fisher harvested per 100 permits, it's fairly stable at around 6 fisher being taken for every 100 permits that are issued. On a unit-by-unit basis, the highest harvests continue to occur in some of the westernmost WMUs that are open to fisher trapping, particularly up in the northwest region where we continue to see high harvests. So our fisher trapping season proposal is again similar to what we proposed in terms of the duration and the dates, running from December 15th to the 26th. We are asking to maintain a season bag limit of 1 fisher at this time, but that is an area that we'll probably explore thoroughly within the fisher management program. Is at what point do we begin to increase bag limits and allow trappers to take more than 1 fisher in a given season? As you consider your agenda tomorrow, we are proposing expansion of fisher trapping seasons into units 4B and 4C. We've been watching trends in those areas for several years, and we feel we have sustainable populations there where we can provide that trapping opportunity. The issue of fisher hunting has been coming up more and more frequently. I know our partners in the Dog Owners Association have brought it up previously, and that will be addressed earlier in the fisher management plan as well. I can say that in terms of fisher management in the Northeast, there's only a couple of jurisdictions that allow any type of hunting activity, and there's very little participation in resulting harvest. I would think it's fair to say that would not be the case here in Pennsylvania. If we offer a hunting opportunity, there'll be a lot of interest, a lot of participation, and a lot of harvest. So it's something that we'll have to really explore very thoroughly in that plan. On a broader perspective, when we look at fur taking in general in Pennsylvania, we continue to break the mold in that we've seen significant and steady increases in our fur taker license sales for the last 20 years. Most states can't say that. We may see some stabilization now, but we're still maintaining a healthy and large and active workforce of trappers and fur-bearer hunters. And what's interesting, if we look at pelt price trends, these red and black lines, is that we're maintaining over 43,000 active fur takers at a point when pelt values for red fox and raccoon and other commonly trapped and hunted species are at rock bottom. They're at the lowest they've been in the last 20 years. And yet we continue to see a lot of activity and resulting harvest from our community of trappers and hunters, and that's encouraging to us. We think one of the reasons this trend has been maintained is that we're constantly trying to provide more and unique opportunities, whether it was our bobcat hunting and trapping seasons, the legalization of cable restraints, a fisher trapping season in 2010, and a river otter season in 2015. there's always these new opportunities, and each and every one of these cases, we've recruited some new people into our ranks and maybe reinvigorated people who had trapped in the past as these new opportunities came up. And so I bring this up because I think there's a lesson to be learned there as we look at junior fur takers and this issue of declining junior fur taker participation. You know, juniors can participate in fur taking through a junior fur taker's license, of which relatively few are sold, or a junior combination license. And although those license sales have been stable in the last 5 years, through our surveys, we've been able to determine that the participation in fur taking under those license structures has been declining. After our discussions at the fall working group meeting, I actually surveyed all of the states in the eastern U.S. and eastern Canadian provinces and asked if they provided any unique youth trapping or fur bearer hunting opportunities. And the response was that they really didn't. Most states had done, and what we've done is to provide an inexpensive mechanism or inexpensive license for younger trappers to try and encourage them to participate. And so there's really no model out there in terms of what works and what doesn't. And I think that's interesting when we look at the success we've had with other youth seasons for hunting, whether it be waterfowl or a youth pheasant season, or, you know, that seems to be a standard operational model that we use in setting hunting seasons, and that we just haven't done it in the fur bearer community. So as we think about providing new opportunities to our junior fur takers and junior combination license holders, I think we have the opportunity to break new ground in terms of how we approach that. So we had some discussions about a junior trapping season. I provided you some pros and cons to that at the previous working meeting. We've had discussions with the Pennsylvania Trappers Association to get some of their ideas. And we've had some other ideas come up, one being the potential for spring muskrat season open only to juniors. You know, we have concerns about our muskrat population, but they're not being driven by harvest pressures. There's other factors at work. Spring seasons are utilized in other states. New York, for example, it's a great time of year to be out trapping muskrats, and those juniors would be trapping the most valuable muskrats we have here in Pennsylvania during periods of peak primeness. And are there other opportunities? Could we allow a junior to utilize their fisher permit outside of that limited 11-day window? That's one idea. There might be other ideas that could expand to some of these other species that we're interested in. I think what we really need to do, and what we've been talking about internally, is developing a survey of our combination license holders. Number one, to evaluate what level of interest is there in fur taking. If so, what species and opportunities would they have in mind, and what are the limitations, and is it feasible for us to address those limitations through our regulatory process? And so that's one area that we're looking to move forward with, and I'd open for any questions you might have on any of those issues.
Any questions or comments? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, you know, in the memory of Dave Putnam, we have to ask about porcupines.
Wasn't expecting that one.
That's okay. I'm really not expecting an answer either, so it's okay. But
Okay.
if porcupines weren't mentioned at a meeting, Dave would be upset. So
Okay, we'll look into that again.
thank you. I appreciate
Yep.
that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Zach Wismer.
Actually, one.
Okay, part of your stuff will get cut off.
Yeah, I need notes.
Okay, okay.
All right, good morning. I'm Zach Wismer. I'm a forester from the Northeast region. I was asked to share some information on an ongoing habitat enhancement project that we're doing for a Pennsylvania endangered species, the northern flying squirrel. So in Pennsylvania, we have two species of flying squirrel. We have southern flying squirrel and northern flying squirrel. Physically, they're very similar. They weigh less than 3 ounces. They're 8 to 10 inches in length from their nose to the tip of their tail, so they're about the size of a chipmunk. The best characteristics to distinguish the two species is the color of their belly hair between their front legs. So to an untrained eye, they're virtually indistinguishable. But habitually, they're very different. Southern flying squirrels are common and widespread. Um, they're said to be the most common squirrel species in Pennsylvania. They're habitat generalists, meaning they can live just about anywhere. So if you ever had a flying squirrel in your attic or an outbuilding or something, it's a southern. Northerns are rare. They're Pennsylvania endangered species, and they're habitat specialists, meaning they require a very specific forest habitat. Flying squirrels get their name from their ability to launch off the treetops and glide through the forest on these flaps of skin between their wrists and their ankles. They're nocturnal mammals. They're active at night year-round. They have 1 litter per year in late May. The average litter size is 2. And they have all the usual small mammal predators, including owls, hawks, foxes, cats, snakes. Southern flying squirrels are pretty widespread in the eastern United States. Northerns have a more northern affinity. They're mostly from New England across Canada and the Pacific Northwest. So Pennsylvania is on the southeastern edge of the contiguous northern flying squirrel range. Historically, northern flying squirrel was common across the northern tier of Pennsylvania. An ongoing northern flying squirrel study initiated in 2001 found only a few remnant locations, mostly in the Poconos, with also one in Warren County and one in Potter County. In the Poconos, there's populations on several game lands, including 127, 129, 149, 180, 312, and 318. Like most species of concern, the decline in northern flying squirrel is directly related to loss of habitat and changes in habitat, including the historic overexploitation of forests at the turn of the 20th century, forest fragmentation, loss of forest development, insect and disease issues, notably now hemlock woolly adelgid, and as well as competition from southern flying squirrel is also contributing to the decline. So northern flying squirrels require this late successional habitat type, which is an unbroken stand of conifers with a mixed conifer component. They nest in large diameter trees and snags, and 85% of their diet is the fruiting body of mycorrhizal fungi that grow with the roots of conifer trees. So where northern flying squirrel exists, there's this connection between the squirrel, the conifers, and the fungi. So mycorrhizal fungi form these symbiotic associations with many tree species at the root level. The fungus increases nutrient and water uptake by the tree, and the tree provides carbohydrates to the fungi. So conifer species, and particularly spruce, require this co-beneficial relationship for growth and survival. The fungi then produce these underground fruiting bodies, which is the primary food source for the squirrel. The squirrel is able to locate these underground fruiting bodies, excavate them, and eat them, and they disperse the spores through the stand. The spores then inoculate new areas, colonize new root systems, increase growth and vigor of trees, produce more fruiting bodies, benefit the squirrel. So these relationships are what makes this habitat work. And that's why it's critical that species, whether they're the tree, the animal, or the fungi, are not lost from the system. So in our strategic plan, core goal 1.1 is to keep PA's wildlife from going extinct, becoming extirpated, or reaching a threshold to be listed as threatened or endangered. So in 2007, northern flying squirrel was listed as Pennsylvania endangered, so it's already reached that threshold. The squirrel is common in other parts of its range, so globally it's a secure species. So what we're focusing in on is keeping it from being extirpated from the state. And that's it, that it's such an important goal because of the species plays a vital role in the ecosystem, as we saw in that last slide. So one location where we have northern flying squirrel is Game Lands 149. This is a 2,000-acre tract in southern Luzerne County. Transecting Game Lands 149 is Sandy Run. The stream corridor meets the habitat requirements of northern flying squirrel, has moist soils, has mature conifer-dominated forest, has multiple conifer species, and it also has a mature northern hardwood component. So Sandy Run stream corridor does support a documented population. It was a location that was part of that 2001 study, and there's 40 northern flying squirrel nest boxes located there. I got involved in this project in 2010 while writing the comprehensive management plan for 149. So during the planning process, we delineated a northern flying squirrel special operations zone, and that included the core habitat, which is the conifer-dominated stream corridor there, along with a 900-foot buffer into the adjacent northern hardwood forests. And it also includes supporting habitat, which is potential suitable habitat, which would be this conifer stand up here, as well as some that are off the game lands here, and corridors to get from there to the existing population. We also identified habitat objectives. So we had a mammal management priority that was to improve and extend habitat for the northern flying squirrel. And forest land strategy 1 was to maintain late successional stands with the primary goal of maintaining northern flying squirrel habitat. So based on the recommendations of the management plan, we decided to implement some of this proactive management. We underplanted red spruce seedlings in the core habitat. We wanted to plant red spruce in the supporting habitat and do some intermediate thinnings in the supporting habitat to enhance and promote forest characteristics desired by the northern flying squirrel. All these things are also listed as actions in the Wildlife Action Plan. So why red spruce? Red spruce is a native conifer that was once common across the Pocono Plateau. The presence of red spruce is strongly associated with northern flying squirrel suitability. In fact, during that 01 study, the majority of flying squirrel captures occurred within 15 meters of a red spruce tree. And you can see on these range maps, this one shows the current dispersed red spruce forest types, and then this is that map we saw with the existing population, so they correlate well. Red spruce also supports an abundant and diverse mycorrhizal associations. A study in West Virginia found 19 species of fungi associated with red spruce. And it's an excellent surrogate for species that depend on eastern hemlock, which is important as we're losing hemlock to woolly adelgid. It has similar site requirements, tolerances, structures. There are other species that we could use to replace hemlock. I listed some up there: Norway spruce, western hemlock, white spruce, but none of those are native, so they are less desirable. So in order to accomplish this project, we had to acquire red spruce seedlings, and fortunately for us, we have Howard Nursery. Howard Nursery's been growing red spruce for over decades, specifically for projects like this. And what makes these seedlings so special is that they're grown from seed collected in Pennsylvania from remnant native red spruce populations. So these seedlings represent a northern Pennsylvania ecotype of red spruce that's genetically adapted to our climate, our soils, and our environment. So if we had to look elsewhere for these seedlings, they would be hard to find, and if we found them, they'd probably be from seed sourced in either the southern Appalachians or New England or Canada. So those non-local types would not do as well in Pennsylvania, and they would also possibly affect the genetic diversity of our native trees. All right, so in 2011, Howard Nursery provided several thousand seedlings for Game Lands 149. A portion of these seedlings were planted in the core habitat under hemlock overstory. Red spruce is extremely shade tolerant. It's also a non-preferred browse species, so these seedlings can persist in the understory for decades awaiting release. The seedlings were planted under the hemlocks in anticipation of mortality from hemlock woolly adelgid. So the idea is that as the overstory hemlocks die, they'll be replaced by these established seedlings, ensuring that a conifer component is maintained. And the seedlings will also serve to preserve the fungal diversity on site as other conifers are lost. Seedlings were also planted in the supporting habitat. These trees serve to extend potential nesting habitat and then also create these travel corridors into other existing areas. And these trees will also serve to preserve that fungal diversity. 40 acres received intermediate thinning designed to enhance and promote forest characteristics desired by the flying squirrel. We've reduced residual stand density to stimulate low woody vegetation, which will serve as cover for the forest, for the squirrels as they forage the forest floor. Oaks are removed to minimize competition from southerns, and pine, spruces, and hemlocks that existed in the intermediate and suppressed canopy levels were released from the overtopping hardwood trees. So there were other benefits as well. These plantings help perpetuate thermal cover over cold water fisheries. They improve habitat for other lake successional habitat specialists, and they also maintain the riparian buffer. So last fall, I checked in on these 2011 planting locations, and I found there to be excellent survival rate. Seedlings that were planted in the full shade haven't really grown at all, but they are persisting. Seedlings that were planted in canopy gaps are about 2 to 3 feet tall. So if you look at this Forest Service growth chart here, these seedlings are now about 10 years old. So under canopy, they should be a little less than a foot, and they are. In the open, they're about 2.5 feet, and they are. So if we go out 25 years from now, those ones we planted in the open should be 35 feet tall. They'll be part of the intermediate crown class. They'll be providing habitat. But meanwhile, those underplanted ones will be, if they're still shaded, will be 3 feet tall. But just the fact that they'll be there after 35 years is pretty amazing in total shade. So in the future, we want to do some additional red spruce planting. We have 38 acres of additional standing in the supporting habitat planned, and we want to look at doing some crop tree release around some of those seedlings. We replicated this planting on other game lands. In 2012, red spruce seedlings were planted in core and supporting habitat around populations on 127 and 129. And we pretty much followed the same procedure. We planted in the conifer-dominated core areas here and up here, and then into some supporting habitat. On 127, we've also done some liberation cutting in stands where red spruce and balsam fir seedlings and saplings have naturally established. These are stands that are currently outside of the northern flying squirrel management area. But 127 has these bogs and swamps that serve as refuges for boreal species like red spruce and balsam fir. So those parent trees that have survived in those settings are starting to seed out into the adjacent northern hardwood forest. So the cutting prescription here is to remove the overtopping northern hardwoods and release those seedlings. So you can see in these pictures, originally this stand, there's some seedlings here, they're hard to see, but they're all overtopped by these beech and red maple trees. After the cutting, they're all free to grow. So interestingly, even though the goal of these treatments is to transition them into a conifer-dominated stand that will eventually be managed as permanent lake successional habitat for northern flying squirrel and other lake successional specialists. Currently, they're providing another uncommon forest type, which is early successional terrestrial conifer cover. And that's an important habitat for early successional specialists, especially in cold winters as thermal cover when there's no snowpack. And last January, I visited one of these sites that it was cut about 2 years prior, and I stepped in the stand a couple feet and I flushed a grouse and a snowshoe hare. So those early successional specialists are using it during those times of the year. So I just wanted to make the point that when we manage habitat temporally on a landscape level, we don't really have to choose between early successional obligates and late successional. When we do it right, we can, and we do both. That's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
This is a philosophical question, so it might not be best to a biologist, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But when we are at the extreme southern limit of a population, and we saw that with this flying squirrel, how much effort should we expend to ensure that we don't let it become extirpated in Pennsylvania when that seems to be the way the species is already headed?
Yeah.
And it might be, whether you call it climate change, whatever you want to call it, but I just really do wonder how much time and effort we should worry about, because the species itself is strong, as you pointed out, to the north.
That's something I definitely struggled with too originally. And I think what it comes down to is these relationships in the ecosystem that they have with other things. So the one I pointed out here was with the mycorrhizal fungi. how they kind of feed off each other. So, you know, as I was thinking about putting this presentation together, something else I thought about was maybe the reason that these hemlocks are still holding on in Sandy Run, where in some nearby locations they're almost all dead already, is because that the squirrel is there, and it might be perpetuating this relationship. So I think there's all kinds of, you know, it's hard to say. I think there's all kinds of levels to look at there, and I think it's important that we do our best.
What other species benefit from this particular type of a habitat?
So mostly, I mean, there's a lot of songbirds that rely on this boreal red spruce habitat. I'm not a bird guy per se, but there are quite a few.
Yeah, sure, Dan.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to introduce Todd Pride. He's been working with Philadelphia Youth Outreach Programs, something that we've been talking about for years, trying to reach the youth of the urbanized areas of the state of Pennsylvania.
Brian, thank you. And while we get, I guess, our presentation set up here. So actually,
It's over here.
in addition to myself, actually, I want to make sure that we have added to the agenda Rachel Roberts, who's also going to be presenting with me. Actually, I will run my mouth for a second while she. Getting started, first of all, I want to thank Brian Burhans and Brian Hoover and the other commissioners for allowing me to come and speak for a few minutes about this new partnership in Philadelphia, and I want to give particular thanks and blame to Charlie Fox. Actually this all got started back actually June 2016 when I was visiting your Stone Valley shooting range for a camp that the Wildlife Leadership Academy was hosting there. And actually, it was a week before a new camp that we had helped to coordinate with the Fish and Boat Commission called the Bass School. But, you know, very quickly, Charlie and I got into a conversation about the Game Commission in Philadelphia and these other urban areas. And I've said this many, many times, Charlie, you know, we haven't had an opportunity or really didn't have much of a reason, and I guess Matt Ho, who, you know, was the one who really ignited this initiative. I mean, I think after I left you, I think the next day Brian Burhans had called me, and I think it took us a little while to catch up, because for some reason your office is closed at 4 o'clock, just when we're starting to open up from our activities with fishing and otherwise. But you know, I was extremely impressed when I came up, I think about a month or so after, and met with Brian and Matt and your team. And while I thought the Fish and Boat Commission staff were conservative, I didn't know what I was walking into, but was pleasantly surprised at the openness. And Charlie, the conversation that you and I had, I think, went really, you know, straight to the point of what will it take to expand the Game Commission in Philadelphia. And I said, Charlie, really it's a matter of just showing up. You know, as our first slide here kind of states, I mean, we've got really two sides of our operation. For much of the last 10 years, we're actually in our 10th year right now and surpassed the 10,000 number of students we've introduced to fishing, archery, wildlife education last summer. And actually, I guess purposely, with this relationship with the Game Commission, we've really elevated and have shifted our focus over these next however many years to leveraging the platform that we've established with fishing. And a part of what I'm going to talk about today is really this platform of what we see as where the opportunity is to expand, you know, not only the Game Commission in Philadelphia, but in other urban, suburban markets. And I'm going to ask Rachel to come up in a few minutes. I'm actually going to ask her to really get into kind of this platform of what we're doing in the after-school environment. And, central to all of our training has been conservation and wildlife education. It's something that about 3 or 4 years ago, we really brought to the forefront of what we call this STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math, around these wildlife education elements. I mean, I oftentimes say regarding the fishing side of what we've done, we're not the, worm and bobber in the water. I mean, we're pretty intensive about what we do. Unfortunately, the majority of my coaching staff of 8 are Penn State alums, and myself being a Temple Owl, but I'm really fortunate to have the, actually now all graduates of the Penn State bass team, their leadership working with us, and actually the #1 angler in this region of the country is on our coaching staff, Gray Buck from Penn State. But what we had done, actually after meeting with Charlie, Matt quickly went to an ask of us, and he said, Todd, we've got, a partnership with every sportsman's group, okay, across the state of Pennsylvania, and we've got some really, really strong partners, and one I'm going to highlight in a few minutes, which is the Keystone Elk Country Alliance. So those discussions that we had in August of 2016, when I came to meet with the staff, quickly went to, how can we roll out, the agency's resources in Philadelphia. So in August, actually a year later, I'm kind of jumping a little ahead of myself, and actually on the mouse here, if I can just maybe jump ahead. All right. In August 2017, we had an opportunity to introduce the Game Commission's resources, and what I had said to Brian and Matt and some of the other commissioners I've had an opportunity to speak with is what we've done in Philadelphia has nothing to do with hunting. I said to the team here that, in Philadelphia in particular, this is not a city that is not unaccustomed to hunting. One of the great things that we have about Philadelphia being the popular city that it is, we are a city that has a tremendous number of academic institutions, and mostly within our corporate sector, we have, mostly the leadership of our business community are transplanted from some area of the country that is about hunting. And actually, this past September, we had Todd Holmes, who runs your shooting sports, come down and do our first archery instructor training. And we were actually in a school in West Philadelphia, right next to our Fairmount Park. And as soon as Todd walked in, the principal of the school who was hosting this archery instructor training said, when can we start shooting sports? When can we start clay shooting? And Todd looked at me and he said, Todd, is this some kind of joke? And I said, absolutely not. And actually, the principal is from South Carolina. And I use that as an example of the multitude of leadership, whether or not it's in the business community and the educational community, that are exposed to the element of hunting and some of these other outdoor resources. So this has not been a tough sell in Philadelphia. I mean, the outdoors part of our name that stands for hunting, we don't call it that because, like anywhere else, there's going to be people that have issues with the element of hunting, and we've not had one single challenge in 10 years to the work that we do in introducing students to these type of opportunities. So we're really glad that Todd was able to come down, and I think we've got 7 of our leading after-school and school programs in Philadelphia. They're going to start an archery program this spring and going forward, and hopefully we'll have our Eagles quarterback somewhere in that environment. So, and just lastly on this, which you'll hear me end off with, our big focus over this next couple of years is going to revolve around conservation projects and having student groups, whether or not they're archery clubs or other hunting clubs, work with adult sportsmen's groups to build riparian buffers. So I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And as I had mentioned about Philadelphia, I mean, this is actually a picture of William Penn, who's at the top of our city hall, and I think we all know what Pennsylvania stands for. But that bottom picture is actually a clip from our Fairmount Park in Philadelphia, which, as some people know to be, I think I may have skipped one here. Actually, our Fairmount Park actually is the largest municipal-owned park in the world at 9,200 acres. And adding 1,000 acres to that, to the John Hines National Wildlife Refuge, our largest land mass in the city of Philadelphia is our outdoor resources. So again, it's not an environment where people sometimes perceive that it's this concrete jungle and that's all that students and others have. We actually have a tremendous base in which to focus on these kind of activities. And as I mentioned, this wildlife education and habitat education has really been the premise and will be the premise this year as we expand the commission in Philadelphia. So maybe a little bit tough to see this, but what we've kind of blended together here with the PGC's goal of introducing new constituents to hunting is what we've really laid out in our work, and I'm going to ask Rachel to touch on this regarding this platform of the after-school programs, or some of the really, really important things that actually are a part of these outdoor environments. I talked about STEM education, which is at the core of what we're doing with these after-school and school programs in Philadelphia. And then, as I asked Rachel to come up and give an overview, why after school? And I oftentimes talk to a number of our state leaders. I had Secretary Redding down, actually we had Secretary Redding down in Philadelphia back this past October, and about a month earlier I was with the Secretary out in Lancaster County near our headquarters, and I said, Secretary, I'd love for you to come to Philadelphia and talk to us about, what the agency is doing. Obviously there's a huge overlap between things that are happening between our wildlife and our agriculture. And he said, Todd, I'm in Philadelphia often. There's a school there, W.B. Saul, which is one of the oldest agricultural high schools in the country. I said, yeah, we know them, we work with them. I said, they've got about 500 students there, but, I'm working now with an initiative in Philadelphia that has 16,000 students, which are our after-school programs. And I said, this is an environment that, for us as an organization, our first 6 years, we modeled what we do with these kind of outdoor programs in every, what I call, contact point with students. Before the school day, the beginning of the school day, the middle of the school day, the end of the school day, and then after school. And I can tell you from our work, the most fertile environment to introduce any of these kinds of activities are the after-school programs. And I was fortunate that when Charlie and I met in June 2016, I was just in the midst of introducing what these non-traditional activities for the city of Philadelphia's after-school and summer programs, which is kind of branded what they call OST, which stands for out-of-school time. It's an environment that we've been in as an organization for, now going on 10 years. But it's an environment where, kids are getting together, okay, whether or not it's at a school location or it's at a Boys and Girls Club or it's at a police athletic league. These are the type of fertile environments that students and actually the leadership of these sites and organizations are looking for things to do. It's something we've been extremely successful with, okay, with fishing and other types of activities. So when Charlie and I met, I said, we've got a really great environment that we can actually introduce this to. So I'm going to ask Rachel to come up and talk a little bit about just the structure of this after-school environment, which again, I think a little different than that perception of worm and a bobber. A lot of people think, after school is just a matter of kicking around a ball, but we're fortunate in Pennsylvania to have a very, very, structured environment. So Rachel, why don't you talk for just a couple of minutes about that environment.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. My name is Rachel, and I'm standing in front of you with over 20 years of experience in community service, and over the last 12 years have run one of the City of Philadelphia's largest after-school and summer enrichment contracts. It's a $22 million contract that's paid out to 170 different programs just in the City of Philadelphia alone. Since 2006, I've also been on the Pennsylvania statewide after-school and youth development network and work very closely with them. So as Todd said, the why us, why after-school and summer enrichment, why is that an opportunity? As you all have probably seen in the papers, after-school and summer enrichment is a huge funding item in Pennsylvania. You have what's called the 21C programs. These are after-school programs that are under a lot of pressure but have a lot of opportunity to provide STEM learning that's no longer available in our classrooms in most schools across Pennsylvania who struggle to source and get supplies for what they need for a lot of the STEM learning that is required. So for us, it's a no-brainer to bring outdoors learning and experiences to youth, middle schoolers, and high schoolers. As we know, when you're hunting, when you're fishing, when you're doing any type of farm work, you're incorporating what I like to call meso-level STEM skills. So it might not be coding on a computer, it might not be a petri dish in a lab, but you're certainly learning how the world works, how nature works, how to put things together, and what are the necessary base level STEM education skills that you need to have in order to understand science generally. So archery is a perfect example. You have lesson plans around archery that have to do with velocity, that have to do with the science of pulleys. You have lesson plans around angling that have to do with the engineering of fishing rods. I can go on and on, but as we've sat here today, what we're looking at and enjoying in terms of the presentation to the game commissioners is all science. So these after-school and summer enrichment programs are embracing the outdoors learning with open arms. They were very excited during the archery training, and each of these summer enrichment and after-school programs has a dedicated staff. So this is an area that can be leveraged. The funding is there, the mandate is there, the project-based learning type of environment is there where it can't be a one-off. It needs to be something that is happening over time. So in terms of readying the youth and their families who participate in the events, they're readied with information. They're given lesson plans, they're given project plans, and then the projects are done over time. So over an entire school year or over an entire summer, it's just a really perfect environment to get something and to have the technical assistance and the support and the resources for questions so that people can become self-sufficient archers, self-sufficient anglers that aren't lost once the introduction of the activity is over. And so the slide we have in front of you here in terms of expanding the Game Commission is that this is of value, of great value to, again, we're using Philadelphia as an example, but we work with Lancaster City, Oxford, Pottstown, all of these different urban, suburban towns that are really well situated and also have very strong after-school environments across the state. This introducing the outdoors activities is of great value to those programs, and then those programs work hand in hand with their city councils, with their state reps. These are nonprofits that have been in the business for years. We're talking Boys and Girls Clubs, we're talking Methodist Community Services, Catholic Social Services. They're not new to the game. They've been around, they're going to be around, and good things that can be brought to their programs, generate really good word of mouth. So we're looking at these, the wildlife slides, and those are the different environments that these schools are funded to go out into, but without having more activities there, they're doing a stroll through a park, and that's not valuable to them. It doesn't match their STEM requirements, their scope of work requirements. They have to prove outcomes, and they have to prove that these youth are learning something, especially for the high school youth, that they're getting some career exposure out of it. So again, those resources that we have in Philadelphia, it's important that the youth families get some exposure that involves targeted activities. Here's an example of a list of partners, and they're just wonderful to work with. Again, it's dedicated staff. You don't have to send a trainer, and then that trainer is burdened with questions. The staff are taught what to do. It's a train the trainer model, and they're given lesson plans, and they're given rubrics so that if they want to develop their own projects and activities around this, they can, and we can give them feedback on it. But again, it's all, once the staff are trained, it's really in their hands. So in terms of capacity, it's there. In terms of logistics, it's not complicated. They give you the place, they give you the staff, and they're hungry for the knowledge. So this is what I'm saying. It's just, again, you don't have to build it. You just have to go, and you just have to provide the education to the staff that's already there, and give them the resources and materials and the continued technical assistance, which again, because they're staff that are year-round, that are dedicated, and that are mission-driven because they're from nonprofits, it's really, it's a nice, sustainable fit that can generate outcomes for them, but can also, provide the good word of mouth, the goodwill that we've seen as we've gone into these environments. Okay.
So relative to our partnerships, actually this previous slide here, I just want to touch on this trailer that you see. That's actually our show side trailer. Some of you may have seen one of these types of trailers around, but fast forwarding from, and actually probably some of the quickest work we've ever done with a government agency in our 10 years is from our meeting in June, actually my conversation with Charlie in June of 2016, meeting with Brian and Matt and the team, a month or so after that, we quickly went to how do we get something on the ground, and had a customized trailer made with the Keystone Elk Country Alliance. Actually, we have the Game Commission's logo actually on our next page here. But before I jump to that, right below that is actually the annual kickoff conference for the Philadelphia After School and Summer Programs that took place this past August 2017 at the beginning of school. And that gentleman standing up below the trailer side is actually Dan Lynch, who I think runs the education for the Game Commission, the Southeast region. I mean, I was truly stunned at Dan's presentation to these after-school leaders, and really set a great stage for what we're doing down in Philadelphia, and those are some of the other environments that took place that day. Our partners that have stepped up, and also in addition to the Keystone Elk Country Alliance, Brian brought the Audubon Society of Pennsylvania to us. I know we've got one of their team members here, and are really happy to have Audubon working with us in this, kind of birding while hunting is a new initiative that we're looking to launch this year. And actually those two middle pictures are a group of students and parents at our Southern Lancaster County headquarters, and in that trailer actually is a full-mounted elk that I believe, Brian, came from your Southwest office. So we're happy to be able to take that around, and when we roll that elk out in North Philadelphia and other places, it actually gets quite a bit of a reaction. But really happy to have this to be able to move around and kind of bring to life this partnership that we have. These are just some of the other partners that we have as an organization that we're able to draw upon for what we're doing with the Game Commission, and these span both state, regional, and national. We're fortunate to have a long-term partnership with Cabela's and to be, their leading youth organization, and will be highlighted at the outdoor show in Harrisburg next week. All right, so I'm going to jump past this, and just in summary, this is our contact information. I mean, we've got, some of our materials here, but, just really happy to have this kind of relationship in Philadelphia. One of the other, I guess, strategic elements that we're looking to take further advantage of, our former governor and mayor, Ed Rendell, and our actually current managing director of Philadelphia is the former secretary of DCNR, Michael DeBaradinis. And, both of them have pledged their support to what we're doing in Philadelphia and looking to expand it. So as Brian and I have talked over the last several months, I mean, this partnership we see as an actual model, not only across the state, but nationally. So we're glad to have this and continuing to build some momentum and, having the support of the commissioners here. So thank you.
Todd, I want to thank you for all the work that you do, and Rachel is saying, when you guys have a program that's been waiting for Philadelphia and for the urban areas for a long time, and to get dedicated volunteers and dedicated people involved and such, and bring the Pennsylvania Game Commission into it is something we've struggled to do in the city of Philadelphia and the urbanized areas of the state of Pennsylvania. So it's been awesome, and anything that we can do, anything that I can do personally to help you out, I'd certainly be willing to.
Well, Brian, you're close to where we are, so.
Absolutely.
And I just want to reiterate, just the strategy that we've laid out, and I think as Brian knows, I mean, we've had the fortunate opportunity, I mean, given the success that we've had, we've helped to design some programs for the fishing and boating industry nationally, and have been in this space. I mean, we've been on the ground, we've kind of proven a part of what we've been able to do, but the strength of the Game Commission, as I said at the beginning, is not about hunting. Our focus in Philadelphia and some of these other areas is communicating, what the commission does in managing all of our state's wildlife. When I talk about the Game Commission, I say this is our wildlife agency. So it's about the 400 and some species that the Game Commission manages. I think the 100 and some are